All right, as Anna said, I'm Scott Lathrop. I'm a colonel in the United States Army, incognito today. I want to thank the ARC and Anna in particular for inviting me back here to my roots here in the great state of Michigan, where I'm from. My roots at the University of Michigan. If I use a local parlance, I am a Michigan man. Go blue. And finally, my roots as an Armor Cav officer of the United States Army. You see, I graduated from the United States Military Academy in 1990 with a degree in computer science. I was commissioned as an armor officer, and I went my first assignment to the Fulda Gap on the old East-West German border. And a lot of the vehicles that I oversaw in both my scout platoon, my tank platoon, and then my tank company when I was a tank company commander in the 2nd Infantry Division are many of the vehicles that you've seen up here today. So from the bottom of my heart, and the bottom of my heart of the soldiers I have led, I want to thank this community for what you've done to make our vehicles survivable, dependable, and durable. And using the words of Paul Rogers, thank you for bringing us home safely. I appreciate it. Just a little more about me. So after I commanded my tank company, I took a little divergent in my career, and in the Army standards, this was kind of a non-traditional path. The Army decided to send me back to get my graduate degree, and I did my graduate degree both here at the University of Michigan, and then later on I did a PhD back here at the University of Michigan with assignments at West Point as a professor, the United States Military Academy, 2 separate occasions. I also did a tour at the Pentagon, running all the IT systems for the Army Operations Center, and that was right after 9/11. And then I'll talk a little bit here in a second about my time over in Afghanistan. Next, you get the slide clear. Thanks. All right, so briefly on my work that I did, my PhD work here, I was in the computer science and engineering program. My advisor was John Laird. We were looking in the area of artificial intelligence, specifically cognitive architectures. And so cognitive architectures, briefly, are just general mechanisms that try to model human cognition and support intelligent systems. And so they have many applications. One of those applications that we were working with the ARC in particular, and TARDAC, were with autonomy. How do we introduce tactics into our autonomous vehicles, unmanned platforms? So my contribution to this work, traditionally cognitive architectures focused on symbolic centennial representations, which really try to model working memory, long-term memory, and the cognitive thought process of higher order abstract reasoning and decision making. My research contribution was to go back and look at how do people use mental imagery to solve problems and how to reason. I really took this from my experiences in the Army, where as a tank company commander, oftentimes my organization was dispersed at long distances, 3 to 5 kilometers, where you can't actually see all your folks, and you can't see, obviously, the adversary that's approaching you. And so how do you make decisions with incomplete information? Well, one mechanism we found is that people use mental imagery. So how do you model that in a computational system? And so what we found is that by modeling mental imagery and incorporating these computational mechanisms into a cognitive architecture, we could gain some computational efficiencies for certain domains, specifically domains where obviously you have high levels of spatial reasoning or visual processing. And then also there were some information gains to be had. So from Michigan, after 2008, I went back to West Point for my 2nd tour there, where I was an associate professor in the electrical engineering and computer science department. A couple of my main contributions there. First, the cyber defense exercise, which we started my first tour at West Point, and the cyberspace program that we started at West Point back in the early 2000s was significant. And now looking back on it, we didn't realize how significant it was, but we were educating our future leaders in this domain that we're now building. The cyber defense exercise, just for those who are unaware of it, is an annual exercise between the military academies at the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, Merchant Marine, and Coast Guard Academy, with the Naval Postgraduate School and Air Force Institute of Technology also participating. The academies build their systems, their network systems, and then the National Security Agency's Red Team tries to penetrate those systems. I'm happy to say that we've been running that exercise for 14 years now. We started it back in 2001, and the United States Military Academy, the Army, has won 7 of those events, so 50%. So when the Air Force says that they're the technically superior service, we just come back with that statistic at them. Another contribution, which was really through the help of TARDEC, was we were able to start our robotics program there at West Point. TARDEC gave us some funding to get our laboratory up and running and to get some actual pack bots from the field into the educational program, and then we could further develop the cadets' education and research in that area. From there, I also did a stint over in Afghanistan during that time. The reason to go over to Afghanistan was at West Point, and the National Military Academy of Afghanistan, which was standing up, wanted to model their military officer development program after West Point. And so what we did from West Point is we sent some professors over there to help stand up their programs. I specifically was working with the computer science department and also their IT folks who were helping set up the IT infrastructure there. Very proud of that work that we did there. Probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my military career. What we did is we helped build their curriculum. We were able to hire some faculty, civilian faculty members that had just recently graduated from the Kabul University there, helped get some basic programs in place. And then we were able to bring in students from across the Afghan provinces from all ethnicities and from both genders. And that was really key in 2008, 2009 to get those types of people in there. Thucydides, a Greek philosopher, once said that if a society separates its thinkers from its fighters, then it runs a risk of having its fighters be fools and its thinkers to be cowards. And the great thing about an educational program such as what we have at West Point, what we built in Afghanistan, and a research community like this where we bring together both the thinkers and the fighters, and in some cases folks who are both thinkers and fighters, is that we can further that collaboration and we can help officers and leaders in our military make ethical decisions at a time when sometimes those decisions are hard to make. Finally, my last job, the job I'm currently in right now, is as the Deputy Director of our Research and Development Program at the United States Cyber Command. The United States Cyber Command is a new organization that was stood up in 2010 to respond to threats in a new domain that DoD is now calling cyberspace. A disturbing trend over the last few years that we've seen is the adversary moving from exploitation, or kind of hitting us with, mosquito swats into our systems, to more disruptive type attacks, such as attacks that you've seen on Wall Street, and recently more destructive type attacks. For example, in 2012, an adversary took down 30,000 computers at the Saudi Arabia's Arabic Oil and Gas Company. And when I say take down, they wiped their hard drives. And you may say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal about that is our nation's wealth is now stored in the form of information. Whether it be our finances, our designs, our engineering designs, our software, the data we exchange on our automotive systems for vehicle control or intelligent vehicle communication. That's all subject to disruption. And so we're taking that very seriously at the United States Cyber Command. This is the United States Cyber Command's mission. Again, it was stood up in 2010. The Department of Defense in 2011 recognized cyberspace as another domain on par with our land domain, our air domain, our sea domain, and our space domain. Since that time, we are building out a force structure. That force structure is similar to a force structure that we have in our Army units. For example, our armor companies that support our armor battalions and our armor battalion combat teams. In this case, we have three types of teams we're building. National mission teams, which are to defend the nation in cyberspace. Cyber protection forces, which are taking a more active role in defending our own networks. These are our DoD networks to make sure that we're reliable. And then finally, combat mission forces that are going to be supporting combatant command objectives in theater. this is the technology problem space we work in. And from my directorate's perspective, this is where we have to have expertise at. From the inner box to hardware layer, those embedded systems, whether they be running in a typical IT system or in an automotive system. Our system software, whether it be traditional general purpose operating systems or real-time operating systems that we might have running in our, again, in our vehicles or other platforms that we have. Application software, and then finally cyber-physical systems, or those systems where computational devices that are interconnected can create physical effects. And in the automotive industry, obviously, that's the direction we're moving towards. So the question is, how do we secure and protect those systems? That's the question that we're trying to answer from my perspective. So in conclusion, the impact that you've all had on me has been significant. First and foremost, again, I want to thank each and every one in here and the folks from the past who have built our systems and done the research to make our systems safe and secure and to protect and defend the freedoms of this great country called the United States of America. Second, it was brought up in several other talks, the interdisciplinary nature of the ARC is very important from my own personal research perspective, giving me more breadth and depth towards my critical thinking skills. And finally, I think just the research in general that the ARC provides and other organizations at Michigan really makes you unafraid of exploring the unknown. And this has been very valuable, not just only in my own research, but helping cadets, former cadets and students in their research. And then as we continue to grow organizations such as the United States Cyber Command, where we don't always know where we're going, but we have a general idea where we need to get to, that's been very important and very helpful. So thanks again.
So when engine operation is characterized by the pair of engine torque and engine speed. And as we drive the vehicle, essentially, we have